Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. At the moment, it is all happening in Parliament, apparently, because the Liberal Party and the Nationals are very upset that so many people have been released into the public as a result of a High Court decision, which had nothing to do with the government of the time, namely the Albo government. It had a lot to do with the High Court believing that incarcerating people for the rest of their lives without chances of being returned to any country was not constitutional. Now, what does interest me about this compared to the United States is that you and I generally wouldn't know who is in the High Court, who's making these decisions. But it is, and it doesn't become political. This is quite an apolitical type situation, interestingly enough. But what it has done has meant that the Liberal Party or the opposition has had a chance to have a go at the Labor Party, the government, for not taking the action that they believed that they should have taken. Even though the government has admitted that they had been planning for this decision prior to the decision being brought down. That isn't good enough for the Liberal National Country Party because they believe that everybody should have a crystal ball, should have known decades before exactly what was going to happen in relation to these issues, even though they themselves had been in government for most of that time. It is a catastrophe to think that there have been people that have been released into our community who have committed some horrific crimes. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But it wasn't the government's or the opposition's decision. It was an independent body, namely the High Court and its judges, who made that decision. Now, at the time that these questions were asked in Parliament yesterday, the High Court had not issued a written response to the reasons as to why they've made the decision that they have. But it doesn't mean that action could be taken in order to change any of this. And there has, as of today, the government are moving in the Senate for legislation that will better ensure that the community is safe from these people that have been released. Now, what did interest me was that the opposition have decided that for whatever reason, there were 5 or 6 people that had committed horrendous crimes. But we do seem to forget that 83 of those people were detained as well because they didn't have a place that they could return to. Now, I want to know who are the balance of those people, some 75 people or so, and what were the reasons why they had been detained. Now, for some of these people, and for most of them, probably hadn't committed any crimes here in Australia, that the crimes that they'd committed, according to the countries from which they come, may have been horrific, who knows. But we do not know because we just haven't been given that information. The focus is simply on these 7 or 8 people that have committed some of these crimes. Now, one of the questions I keep wondering about is if they've committed crimes in Australia, why haven't they been committed to trial here in Australia? And if so, why haven't they just been incarcerated in our prison system? I haven't got any answers for any of this. And I don't see anybody, interestingly enough, asking the same sorts of questions. But what has happened as a result is that Dutton has chosen to use this as a political opportunity to have a go at Albanese. So what I'm going to play to you is about 4 or 5 minutes, I think, of edited debate that took place in Question Time yesterday. Complete waste of Question Time. Question Time is a great opportunity for people to ask questions, clearly, but it is an opportunity for the government to respond to those questions. That was consumed entirely on this occasion by questions by moving, I should say, of this particular motion. So I'm going to play for you Dutton's opening statement and then most of Albanese's response to that. And then I'm going to play to you when Albanese says, well, this is an opportunity for Sky After Dark to have a go at me. I'll show you what Sky After Dark did. So sit with me while we go through this, and if I make any comments along the way, I'll let you know.
The following motion. The House, 1, expresses its grave concern at the vicious rise of anti-Semitic vilification in our country and the breakdown in social cohesion occurring in our communities. 2, expresses its grave concern that social disharmony has reached dangerous levels and that community safety is now at significant risk. 3, condemns the Prime Minister's failure to show the strong leadership required to overcome divisions within his own caucus, to stamp out anti-Semitism and bring our country together.
Order.
This Prime Minister needs to stand up and to be united with the Jewish community.
There is no issue too big.
So the issue here is that, according to Dutton, is that Albanese has not... So there's two issues, basically, that Albanese has not been able to stand up for anti-Semitism, to stamp it out. Don't know how in the hell you do that necessarily, but nevertheless, that's Dutton's argument. And then the other one was conflating that with the people that haven't been released or have been released, according to the High Court. So these two things were brought together in this one particular motion. And Albanese's response, I think, in my view, in my humble view, was probably one of the best responses one could ever see. So let's continue with that.
No issue too big for him to show how small he is. The weaponisation or attempt to weaponise anti-Semitism in this chamber and make it a partisan issue is frankly beyond contempt. So to come in here and move this resolution and link anti-Semitism with the decision of the High Court is beyond contempt. This is the same political party
The member for Fairfax.
that tried...
I do think that most of us would, those reasonable, rational people would tend to agree that trying to conflate these two things together is simply about opportunism and is about the worst possible side of Dutton you can get.
Repeal Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. And I stood with Peter Wertheim and other members of the Jewish community at that time. The Executive Council of the Australian Jury said this: that would be the worst possible message to send at a time of increasing fear, insecurity and polarisation. It would be a serious abrogation of principled leadership by government, and indeed it was, which is why it was defeated. I make no apologies for standing up against anti-Semitism, and I will do it unequivocally, as I have, as someone who led a campaign against a councillor in my own electorate, against the BDS campaign, I think 2 decades ago. I have a track record on this, and I'm proud of it. But I also have a track record of standing up for the rights and for justice of Palestinian people. And I make no apologies for being a consistent supporter of a two-state solution.
And what interests me about these particular comments from Albanese is that you don't hear the right doing the same thing. Whereas Albanese is able to differentiate between what is happening for the Jewish community in Israel and Jewish communities around the world, and also what's happening for Palestinian communities also. So he's not pointing out as one side being more righteous or more right than another. He's simply relating to the events, how they've impacted both of those communities. In other words, he's a man not taking sides, but we can't argue the same, unfortunately, for the clown that we call Dutton.
And I make no apologies for trying to bring communities together, not divide them. Leaders have a choice. They have a choice to either bring people together or divide them. Try to look for unity or look for opportunism.
Order.
And what we have seen from this bloke here is consistent with his entire political career has been based upon division. No one should threaten people because of their religion or their race in this country.
And I think that's the whole point. And that's the issue for me is that there's no, I was going to say equivalency, I guess that's the word. There's no way of looking at this that does take one side over another. And this is what I really like about Albanese's address. In fact, I think it's one of the best speeches he's ever given that it's just off the cuff, is that is not taking a side specifically. He's being empathetic towards both sides of this conflict. But Dutton, though, is using this as an opportunity to divide, to create division by taking one side in preference over another side, but just by just focusing on one issue, and that is about anti-Semitism in our community. And it isn't just about anti-Semitism, which is horrific. It is also about the way that Palestinians are being treated also in our community. And we must understand that both of those are wrong, both of them. And Albanese is doing what he can here to point.
He said that we should have prevented people from being released, prevented a High Court decision. Having stood in here day after day, week after week, month after month and said, you've got to respect the Constitution. You can't change the Constitution because if you do, you can't out-legislate it. That's what he said. That's what they all said in Justified.
Order.
Their no vote.
I love these shots. I love these shots of Dutton. He looks like a stunned mullet. He looks like a kangaroo caught in the spotlight. The poor bastard is about to be shot and he doesn't know what to do about it. I think they're great. They're not intended to be that way, but God, that's certainly the way they appear to me.
Day after day, week after week.
Order.
This is what he said in May in this chamber. The Parliament cannot out-legislate the Constitution. But when it's convenient, we'll just chuck it out and pretend it doesn't exist. The opportunism of the Leader of the Opposition has been exposed for all to see here today. I didn't think that he could go this low as to link these two issues. And then he tries to link it as well with just to get another crack in the tabloids or to get a hear from Sky After Dark.
You should really...
So let's hear what Sky After Dark and my favourite man, Andrew Bolt, let's just hear what he has to say, and then I'll follow that with something that Sherry Markinson also
worry
says.
about, but the ones he's just freed from immigration detention, along with other criminals, 83 now in all.
What did you make of Peter Dutton's quite extreme...
So that was Bolt's go, I guess. I didn't want to play all of that because it's bloody boring. And Sherry, this is a little bit of her crap as well.
Extraordinary speech in question time today. I'm going to come...
And of course, this is what Albanese was talking about, was how they celebrate. I thought, personally, and I try to be reasonably rational, but I thought Dutton's speech was terrible. It was shocking, and it was everything that Albanese said it was. I thought Albanese was actually outstanding.
Come back to it and play it on the show a bit later because it...
Oh no, please don't. Already done. You won't be seeing that again.
It really was sensational in the way that he stood up for the Jewish community. Really strong comments. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I think he was very powerful. I think Peter Dutton has...
No, it wasn't. It was just
has really risen in this whole issue over both the Jewish situation in Australia, the anti-Semitism that's on the rise, Shari, that you've covered so brilliantly, and he's also risen on this issue of these 83 people who have been released into the community. I mean, I think there's always been some question marks over Peter Dutton. I think what he's shown...
Yes, I think there's been lots of question marks over Peter Dutton. And as he opens his big gob trying to strike down the Labor Party, he tends to create more division, more hate, more fear, and more loathing of him.
Particularly today, and I'm pleased you're going to play that speech at length. I think what Peter Dutton has shown, that he is showing real leadership.
The following motion.
No, he's not.
The House.
Anyway, that's kind of, I hope that gives you an overview of some description. A little bit biased because it's coming from me, I understand that. But Also, just to understand that what Dutton presented in this motion was a moment in which he wanted to catch the Labor Party out. I believe he failed miserably. I think the Labor Party had planned to put forward some legislation in relation to this, and it's worth noting that the legislation that they're putting forward could very well be overturned by the very court that ruled in favour of immigration detainees to be released. So who knows where that's going to go? And I don't even think the government is all that convinced that that legislation may hold up, depending on what it is. My understanding is that primarily the legislation is about ensuring that people cannot live within 500 metres, for example, of a school. They have to report in every day, and there's some rulings here which would have to be coordinated with state governments because they obviously manage their own police departments. So let's see what transpires here. I'm sure that at some level some of this legislation is likely to be challenged, but at the moment it seems to be bipartisan in at least accepting what that legislation may be. And I'd like to think that if you like anything of what I say or not, who cares, subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so that I can, comment so that I can comment on any comments that you might care to make. All right, take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. And more importantly, ensure that you and the people that you love are safe.